Hello everyone, I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. In this video, I want to talk about the Netflix show The Magicians. The Magicians aired 5 seasons between 2015 and 2020, and I am so mad, so upset that I hadn't heard of the show before. The only reason I know about it is because a while ago I sort of fucked my Netflix algorithm because I would only watch fantasy shows and nothing else. I was in a weird phase, okay? I wanted something Harry Potter-esque, but Harry Potter wasn't doing it for me. So I just went through this rabbit hole of watching these fantasy shows on Netflix, and none of them were good, of course, until I watched The Magicians, and it just hit the spot, okay? Which, by the way, I am upset that The Magicians will be leaving Netflix soon. You know, for what the show is, I am very surprised that more people are not talking about the show. I guess it's niche and doesn't appeal to a broad audience, so maybe that's the reason for it, but still though, it is pretty good. Anywho, so we're gonna try and change that. Just a heads up, this video will have spoilers of the show, so if you haven't watched it, watch it, then come back. Or if you are like me and you don't really mind the spoilers, I don't know what's up with that. So, I mean, if you're a weirdo like me, I'm happy to have you on board. Okay then, so let's finally get into the video. Now, I've often heard The Magicians being described as the combination of Harry Potter and the Chronicles of Narnia, but if it was made for adults, it is not necessarily incorrect. And if I were to describe the show in a sentence or two, that's how I would describe it. But it's just so much more than that. The Magicians isn't simply a Harry Potter or a Chronicles of Narnia type of fantasy. That description of the show leaves out a lot of stuff that makes the show what it is. Magical stories and fantasy worlds often have many stereotypes, and in The Magicians, we see them break these stereotypes, not just for the sake of breaking them, but it rather creates something more beautiful. One example I can think of off the top of my head is the Chosen One narrative. There is a protagonist, often a white male lead, and they are chosen to be heroic or do something, and then they are thrust into this whimsical fantasy world. They are given a quest, and then they have to go on this quest and fulfill their destiny. These stereotypes are pretty common in the world building of fantasy and magical worlds. However, the Magicians tries to break them, and as a result, they create something even more beautiful. An example I can give right from season 1, episode 1 is Quentin and Julia. In fantasy stories, we often have this protagonist. They are living their normal lives, and one day they are exposed to this magical, fantastical world, like with Harry Potter. But what if that doesn't happen? What if someone who has magical capabilities doesn't receive a letter and are not introduced to the world of magic? And now a Harry Potter fan might be like, well, Jean, the witches and wizards, they detect people who are capable of doing magic using this little magical process, okay? So it's not really possible for someone to go undetected. To that, I would say, well, don't you think that there is any room for error at all? Like maybe someone's magic is just too small to be detected, or it's not like grown yet, but they are definitely, with proper training, they can become great magicians slash wizards slash witches. Or maybe there are wizards who don't really want their offsprings to know that they can perform magic for whatever reason, and they perform some sort of a spell so that the child is undetected from this magical process. Or what if we see in the magical world of Harry Potter that there is a race disparity between purebloods, half-bloods, and Muggleborn. What if that somehow finds its way into this detection process, and people, magicians who are born to Muggleborns, are less likely to be detected than others? What if, what if Hermione Granger was not accepted into Hogwarts? What if she never received the letter? in her heart of hearts, she would know that she's different. Maybe when she's distressed, she can do a spell here and there, and that would reveal itself, and she would be surprised and shocked, and she would know that she can do magic, but was never accepted into Hogwarts. To that, the Harry Potter fan might be like, well, Jean, then that would be a different world and a different story altogether. Yeah, that story is the magicians. Okay, I'm sorry. I went off on that tangent. In the first episode of The Magicians, we see two characters, Julia and Quentin. And Quentin is accepted into Brakebills University, that's the magical school. However, Julia is not. She is not accepted into this university. So we see two perspectives, two storylines. Both of these characters go on to discover the world of magic themselves. From Quentin's point of view, we see what a normal introduction to magic might look like. More or less, it's a fantastical world that we see through Quentin's eyes. From Julia's point of view, we see how someone who is rejected from that world might go on to discover the world of magic. She doesn't meet her fellow magicians in a university. Rather, she meets them in an abandoned meat factory, I think. Abandoned building. The point is there is contrast between these two perspectives. And it's like real life. And making sure that the world of the magician has this contrast adds a level of depth and realism to it, and I like it. Another example I can think of is the character of Quentin himself. In a lot of these fantasy worlds, the protagonist is the most important character. They're supposed to go on this quest and they are supposed to meet their destiny and do something really important, like save the world or something. However, in this story, Quentin isn't necessarily a main character. I mean, in a way he is, yeah. But compared to other people's storylines and how those storylines are important to the actual broader narrative, Quentin's isn't really that good. I mean, yeah, sure, like Quentin kills a god, but Julia literally becomes a freaking goddess. She, a human being who's also a magician, becomes a freaking goddess. I mean, you can't compare, bro. She's essayed by this trickster god, then she tries to kill him, and then she's almost successful, and then she doesn't, because Persephone stops her, and then she becomes a goddess, and then she becomes a human again, but not quite a human, like an indestructible human, and she becomes a normal human then, and then she becomes a magician again. It's a lot more interesting than Quentin's, for sure. And even, I would say she's more important to the narrative as a whole. That goes for other characters too, by the way. Margot, Elliot, Penny even, not Penny 23, maybe not, but like the original Penny who goes to the library. I mean, that's kind of pretty interesting stuff, okay? May not be like as important to the narrative, but still pretty fucking cool. A lot more cooler than Quentin's. I'm sorry. Alice! Of course, Alice. How can I forget Alice? Alice as well. Although she's not my favorite character of the show, but she is a lot more important and she does a lot more stuff than Quentin. What is the point? Why am I bringing this up? Because even though Quentin is quote unquote the main character, it never really felt like it. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. In a lot of these fantasy shows / books, there's this trope of the chosen one. They are destined to do very great stuff and save the world and the universe and maybe the multiverse even, who fucking knows. And they are on their journey and they're gonna do it and they're gonna save the world and they're the most important character. Blah! Terrible! Point is, it never felt like that with the magicians. While watching the show, it never felt like, oh, it's just Quentin's world and he's the most important character and these are all just side characters. It never felt like it. To me at least, it never felt like that. It genuinely felt like all the characters were just equally important. Okay, maybe not completely true, some a little more than others, but still, my point is still valid. The concept of magic itself is different than what we usually see in fantasy and magical stories. In other magical/fantasy stories, magic is the engine that creates wonder in this world. It makes your life easier. Whatever your concerns were before you found magic, well, you forget them. They are no longer a concern. And frankly, nothing really is. Everything is great and amazing and wonderful and fantastic. Why? Because we have magic. Makes sense. Like with Harry Potter, you have to pick a wand, and you may have to memorize a few words, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Magic in these worlds makes us believe that anything is possible. Anything and everything is possible. However, magic in the world of the magicians is quite different. When you look at magic in the world of magicians from the outside, it looks wondrous, it looks amazing. Dig a little deeper, um, see how universities teach magic, what it's all about. There is a lot of learning. There is math as well. For spells, you really have to practice it. It requires skill and effort. It's rote process. You have to try again and again sometimes to perform the same spell because you're doing it wrong, and it requires a lot of practice, and it is a subject. We see that in Mayakovsky's episode in season 1. Magic is a subject. It has subdisciplines as well. It's a rigorous subject like any other subjects. I would like to compare it to astrophysics in real life. You see all these documentaries about physics and the universe, and you think, "Oh my God, this is so incredible and amazing!" And it is amazing. It is. However, when you go to a university to really study it, well, it's different. It's a lot more rigorous. There is a lot more math involved. Same with magic. It looks amazing on the outside and incredible. However, when you go down and really try to study it, it's rigorous. It requires deliberate effort. And I absolutely love that, actually. Finally, there's a show where, magic isn't just, ooh, ooh, you do magic and it's great and blah, blah, blah. You just, take a wand, you flick it, you maybe say some stuff, you get angry or get like extremely scared or something, and you do magic. No, it's an actual discipline where you have to study it rigorously and with deliberate effort. It's not easy. And I love that because it's more realistic. Another example of this we see in season 1, actually, when Quentin and the gang require battle magic to fight off the beast. However, they can't really do battle magic. I mean, they sure know the steps of how to do it, but it's not really something that they can perform because they're just not skilled. So they try to do battle magic by using these emotion bottles. But of course, that comes with a cost as well. They're quite literally bottling up their emotion, and when the time is up, those emotions come flooding back. Which brings me to another interesting point about magic in this universe, actually. Once magic is introduced in your life, it's not like, oh, here's magic, solves all your problems. It doesn't necessarily do that. It can solve some things that were already a problem because of magic in the first place, yeah. But it can't solve big things. Yes, it can, actually. I'm sorry. Yes, it can solve big things. You can do big magic as well. But it always comes with a cost. And the cost is usually not worth it. There are limitations to magic and what magic can do in this world. We first grappled with this idea in season 1, actually, when Quentin's dad gets cancer, brain cancer, I believe. And Quentin thinks, well, we have magic. We should be able to do anything. We have magic. We should be able to fix this. But he can't. And he tries. He tries to talk to people who know more, who are in the field, who maybe can help, and he researches on his own. But in the end, he comes to the conclusion that he can't. And even if he can, he shouldn't try to do it. Dean Fogg explains it the best, I believe. Fogg actually lost his eyes during his first encounter with the beast. And he just straight up tells him, oh, you think if that's possible, why don't you think I fixed my eyes? Because there are consequences. And if that magic is done on him, it's very much possible that he's not gonna be same afterwards. Makes sense. It adds up. It's a grim reality. I do agree with that. However, this view of magic, with its limitations, and viewing it as a rigorous discipline that you have to put in a lot of effort to not only study but also practice it so you can actually perform magic. I don't know, that just makes it more realistic. And we see this over and over again in the storyline. Hey, whenever they try to fix something, there's always a cost associated with it. Off the top of my head, examples that I can think of. First one is when Alice kills the beast. She is able to do it, and she does it. She kills the beast. But in the process, she becomes a Niffin herself. Second season, Quentin kills Ember, and Ember is a god. So even though he was doing the right thing, he wanted to save Fillory from the god, Ember, I understand why he killed him, but he killed a god, and so the old gods shut down magic. Season 3, they are trying to bring magic back, and Alice, being stupid, she destroys the keys, and so Julia makes more keys so that they could turn on magic. However, in the process, Julia, the person who had gone through fucking hell to reach a deity status, now is just a normal magician. Season 5, they are trying to stop the harmonic convergence and they end up breaking the moon, which they are able to undo that because of time loops. In the end, they were able to move the moon and save the world. However, the moon was still mad that they moved her. So the circumstances are now jacked, and no one can really do magic safely. Whenever they try to fix something, it always comes at a cost. And that's partially the reason why I love the magic building of the magicians. I feel like we've talked a lot now about the world of the magicians. Let's now talk about the seasons and the characters. Actually, you know what? Let's not. Let's not recap season 1 through season 5. I can't do it. I don't know. I just spent like 2 hours talking about season 1. I get hung up on a particular point or a particular episode and I start and I don't stop. I don't know. The summary thing is not really something that I can do. So, I'm not going to summarize. I'm just going to talk about things that I want to talk about, okay? So, if you have not seen the show, you will be kind of lost at this point. So, yeah. Okay, now let's get on with it. So, as I've mentioned, season 1 till season 3, absolutely incredible. Season 1 starts off with presenting and introducing the world of magic to us via Quentin and Julia as our protagonists. Quentin being the person who was accepted into Breakbills, and through him we get the stereotypical introduction to the magical world. Through Julia, we see alternative ways of entering into this magical world because she was rejected from Breakbills. I love the contrast between these two point of views. And I understand Julia's pain when Quentin doesn't go and tell someone about Julia and the fact that she can do magic. Of course, from his point of view, it does sort of make sense. If he does go and tell someone about Julia, it's possible that instead of giving Julia a retest, it's possible that they may try to take away Julia's memories again, and this time Julia does forget for good. On a side note, episode 4, The World in the Walls, was a crazy friggin' episode. This is the episode where we see Quentin's memories of the magical world being treated as if they are delusions. Now, that wasn't the case. What had happened was Julia and the head witch Marina put a spell on Quentin so that he would go to sleep and that's what he would dream of. And Julia didn't know it was going to be that bad, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, when I was watching that episode for the very first time, I started to believe that, oh, maybe this story isn't really about a magical world, but rather a person dealing with his issues and dreaming up of this imaginary world. I started to freaking believe that. Season 1 does take its time to get into the real meat of the subject, that is the beast, and how to fight him off. Some people say the pace of the season was quite slow, but I don't really think so. I think it was just fine. Rather, I prefer it this way. This way it doesn't feel rushed. Of course, the most heartbreaking storyline of this season and the next is Julia's story. She is cast out by Breakbills. She doesn't get in. She tries her very best to enter this world of magic. She knows that it exists. How can she just forget and move on with her life? Of course, nobody would. In the end, she finds these hedge witches who basically they turn out to be kind of psychopaths or sociopaths. Actually, that's not really true. Not all hedge witches were psycho or sociopaths. It was just one, the freaking leader, Marina. And just as she was feeling like she belongs to this group, she learns that, oh, they're actually not really that great people, and then she's cast out again. And it does take her a lot of time to figure it out, to find a place where she feels like she belongs again. She meets with Katie's mother and some other safe houses, but it wasn't right for her. Finally, she does meet Richard and his group, and she finally feels like she belongs again. What Richard and his group are trying to do is to speak to a deity, a god, quite literally, or goddess, to fix their problems. What type of problems? The type of problems that normal magic can't really solve. Like one of the people in the group has cancer and she's not getting any better. Richard himself was a drug addict and I don't want to go into detail, but his actions resulted in his son's death. And there isn't much that he can do. He knows that magic exists, but there's no way that he can do anything to remedy the situation unless they speak to a god, which they do. And oh my god, the last episode of this season, we see Quentin and Julia talk again. They're back to being friends. And I just love Julia's glow. I can see that she is really happy and she has finally found a place where she belongs. I was really happy for her. And then we learn what actually happened when they called upon the deity. Reynard happened. When they called upon the deity who was supposed to answer didn't freaking answer. Instead of her, a trickster god answered, Reynard, and he killed every single one of them, except Katie and Julia. Katie was lucky enough to get out of there, while Julia tried to get him away from Katie. Just because Julia was left alive, that doesn't mean she was spared. She was essayed by this trickster god. I was really not expecting this at all. And God, she went through freaking hell. She went through so much. If you compare the two Julias, right before when she went into Fillory and when she learned that, oh, this had happened, you can see just how. It's so heartbreaking. Which leads me to the following. Now, in season 1, episode 12, 39 Graves, Quentin meets with Dean Fogg, and Dean Fogg explains to him that Eliza, the person who gave her the Fillory Sixth book, who was helping him on his quest, is actually Jane Chatwin from the books, from the Fillory and Further books. And Ember, one of the gods of Fillory, had given her power to create time loops. And so far, she had created 39 time loops, in all of which she failed to stop the beast. Whenever she failed to stop the beast, she would reset the time loop again so she could try again to stop him. What is the point? What am I getting at here? Jane Chatwin seems to be this person who controls these time loops and then changes things to help our protagonist stop the beast. There are a couple of problems with this. When the beast first comes in, he attacks Quentin because apparently the Beast and Dean Fogg, they can remember time loops. So he remembers that, oh, it's Quentin who he needs to kill. So essentially, Quentin hasn't really done anything to the Beast yet. The only reason why he's propelled to stop the Beast is because he's attacked by the Beast first. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Part of me thinks, oh, what would happen if Quentin just didn't go to break bells? Which then brings me to the point that, oh, Quentin did go to break bells, but Julia wasn't. Was that the only right combination that stopped the Beast? Really? You have power to fuck with time. I think you can do better than that. She's dead set on Quentin trying to stop the Beast. She really had to push him in this direction. Like the first time that he meets with Alice, Alice doesn't give him time of day. The only reason why Alice even talks to Quentin is because he had that mark on his hand, which, guess where that came from? Jane Chatwin. Multiple times she gets involved and pushes Quentin in this direction. First of all, giving him the sixth Fillory book, coming in his dreams and telling him, oh, you're walking on the garden path. You're not supposed to do that. Putting that mark on his hand, just generally being there and stopping him from being expelled. Just a few ways where she had interfered quite a bit, and she had really forced Quentin to be here. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's not really the case, and as she says, oh, Quentin is just like a recurring variable that keeps coming along, and so that's why he's there. But I don't know, man. I feel like there must be some other combination or some other thing that Jane could do to stop the Beast. Why am I harping on this so much? Because the combination that did work in the end was Quentin going to break bells and Julia not. That path that Jane Chatwin chose for Julia resulted in her being essayed by this fucking trickster god. And not only that, just the journey was so incredibly hard, and she struggled so much. What if we would have been like, oh, let's have Julia go to break bells but not Quentin? Maybe she even tried that. I don't know. But I just feel like there are other ways to go about this. And maybe she would have, I guess the 40th time was the first time that she had tried this combination where Quentin was in but Julia was out. So she didn't know that, putting her on this path would result in her being essayed by this trickster god. And if she would have known, she would have restarted the loop or something along those lines. I don't know. Or maybe she wouldn't have because greater good or whatever. Maybe she could have really done something. I don't know. I mean, yeah, she's dead, but is she? Oh, she's still there in the clock towers or something, So a version of her is still alive. In a way, Jane Chatwin reminds me of that pig questing creature from season 5 who gives Todd that quest to save Fillory. Like, why him? Why not Julia? The only reason why he gives Todd that quest is because Todd is a man and Julia is not a man. Like that, and the thing is, like, they actually address that, and Julia ends up taking over, and I kind of like that. I just find it, Jane Chatwin is this like character who's supposed to help our protagonist along the ways, like a guiding character for our protagonist, and is this quest-giving character as well. That's that stereotype. However, Magicians is all about not following those stereotypes. I feel like if they would have made Jane a little bit more whole and not just the stereotype, I feel like it would have been a little bit better. Maybe they could have even addressed Julia's point of view, like, oh, can you imagine Julia's point of view, by the way? Because of this Jane woman, she was put on this path, which ended up leading to her being essayed by this trickster god. Can you imagine? Like, of course, if I were her, I would definitely put blame on Jane. I mean, I could definitely imagine Julia going to the clock towers to confront the version of Jane that's still alive. I can see that. I think that would have been kind of good. I don't know. Maybe if, Jane was written so that she would have some actual character flaws, maybe that would have been better. Like, maybe she just didn't think of casting out Quentin instead of Julia. Or, something, anything, I don't know. There are many, many ways to fix this. Another way she could have stopped the beast is by stopping Martin when Martin goes to Fillory with Quentin and Julia. Because we see Quentin and Julia meet the Watcher woman, that's Jane Chatwin. Literally, if she appeared like 3 seconds ago, she would have met with Martin. I find it very hard to believe that she couldn't have stopped him somehow, somewhere. You know what I mean? And by the way, no, it's not because, oh, Jane just can't interfere with the timeline too much. No, no, no. Please, do not give me that. She has been changing the timeline since forever. Okay, you cannot give me, oh, she just can't change the timeline too much. No, that's not real. She can. She just chose not to. And no, there is no way Jane didn't know that Martin was the real beast and not Plover. There is no way she didn't know. What is it? In timeline 23, we see that somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody killed the beast and then Quentin became the beast. So, I mean, if Jane was around, she would have seen that, oh, so Plover was not the beast. Okay. I I find no. She knew that Martin was the beast, and I feel like there are so many ways to stop the beast. I don't know if he had seen Jane's character flaws or something. Maybe she just liked playing God, and oh, she wanted this protagonist, so she's gonna push him into this protagonist role. She likes the protagonist because the protagonist is a fan of Fillory and Further, so that makes sense. And Julia is not, so yeah, that's how that works. I feel like if we would have seen that, that would have been amazing. Now, I do want to mention that because I sound so passionate, it might sound like I don't really like the magicians that much. And that's not the case. I loved it. Were you here for the first part of this video? And frankly, I really liked the timelines story. That's incredible. And here's the reason why I loved it so much. Because in these fantasy stories, we often see there's this protagonist, and he may or may not have his gang, and they have a mission to complete, okay? And the mission is supposed to be incredibly hard, okay? Like, they are not well equipped at all. Often they are children and they can't do it. It's obvious that they can't do it, and they somehow succeed. Point is that the chances of them succeeding were incredibly low. So if the chances are so freaking low, how did they really do it? In The Magicians, there is a simple and clear answer to this. Essentially, having these time loops does explain this. No, the chances were still very low, but we just happened to see the time loop where it all worked out. There were, 40 others in which it didn't. It just happened to be the case that the last time loop that we're watching happened to be the correct one. So yeah, I do like it, although there are certain elements that I do not like, and I may end up talking about those elements more. However, that doesn't mean that I don't love the show. Season 2 has a lot going for it, actually. Elliot and Margot became High Kings and Queens of Fillory. Alice died, dealing with the beast. Quentin grieves the loss of Alice and tries to bring her back. Julia and Katie try to deal with what happened when it comes to, Reynard. And with Penny, we see more of the library and the Great Blank Spot. What is the Great Blank Spot? Essentially, the library has books of every single person, and all of them end after a particular time. Not because they die, the pages are simply empty. And it's not just with one book, it's with every book. We don't know why. And then we learn. Essentially, the main villain of this season is Ember, the god of Fillory. He's a self-serving god. He just wants Fillory to be entertaining for him, and Elliot and Margot are not making it entertaining. which actually makes zero sense because these two characters are the most entertaining characters of the Magicians series. But I guess his and my standards are quite different. I have go to Egypt on my bucket list. He has turn all Philorians into rats on his bucket list. In the end, Quentin ends up killing Ember. And yeah, why was it such a big deal? As mentioned before by Persephone, there are consequences to killing a god. And by the end of the season, we see these people, they show up and they simply turn off magic in the entire universe. Incredible. I've never seen like a fantasy magical show where they dare to get rid of magic altogether or like make magic a very scarce resource. This is really good. A couple of things to note though. This season does have a lot of storylines that don't really feed into the greater narrative. That's it's not like season 1. That's not saying that it's bad. I actually really enjoyed it. Like I mentioned, this does not feel unnatural at all. It works. It works really well. And I really liked the individual storylines of these people, like Elliot and Margot trying to rule Fillory, and Alice dying slash becoming a Niffin, Quentin trying to make her a body, and then when Alice does get back, she really does not like being a human being. In the beginning, Julia and the Beast try to kill Reynard. Then later on, Julia and Katie try. They learn that, oh, Reynard had a son actually, and they ended up using this demigod's energy to make a bullet, a god killing weapon. Julia also gets an abortion, by the way, because turns out she's pregnant with Reynard's baby. Persephone, our Lady Underground, interfered and stopped Julia from killing Reynard. And when she did that, either it was her or Hades who took the magic bullet from her, which would have been interesting if they used that god killing weapon to kill Ember. That would have been interesting. It's okay. I mean, these storylines are very fulfilling on their own, so I'm not really mad that they don't really interlink into the broader narrative of Ember being evil and killing Ember. It's a fun season with a very good twist at the end, where because they killed Ember, who is a god, the old gods turn off magic. I think I've already mentioned this before, but I really love this idea. I've never seen this before and I just love it. Season 3 deals with this world where magic is a very scarce resource, and all our main characters want magic back. Elliot is given a quest in Fillory for the 7 keys to turn on magic, the back door to magic, as they call it. In this season, I love what they did with the fairies. Now, in the beginning, we only saw fairies in Fillory, where they tried to take control over Elliot and Margot, being the shadow puppeteers controlling Fillory. However, other than them really loving human body parts, for some reason, we don't really see much of them. Not really. I mean, yeah, sure, we know that they're cruel, but why? How? We don't know. Apparently, what they're trying to do in Fillory is to cultivate more fairies. Apparently, fairies grow out of these like mushroom things, and apparently, they are doing this in Fillory and not in fairyland. So essentially, in this season, we see another side of the fairies. There is a big, powerful, magical family, the McAllisters, who essentially own fairies. They keep them as slaves. So essentially, the fairies on Earth are slaves. Julia, who has a little tiny spark of magic which was given to her by Persephone, taken by Reynard, was trying to grow her magic, and she had learned that if she does good things, it grows, and she tries to free these fairies. Here we learn that they not only keep these fairies as slaves, but they ground up their bones so they can snort them to do magic. Fucking gross, man. That. But hey, it was good. Before this point, we only saw fairies in Fillory with Elliot and Margot, and they were pretty cruel. Pretty cruel. Now we see a different side to them. Fairies on Earth were in fact slaves. Point is, it's not all black and white. Not all fairies are evil. That's not the case. It really showed that McAllisters were fucking evil. And the library, who were grinding up literal, like, living creatures just so they can do some magic tricks, they are evil as well. And in the end, Julia and the Fairy Queen freeze the fairies, and we learn that the sixth key that they need is actually in the fairyland realm. Sorry. I like that quite a bit because in the beginning, fairies were just these like evil villains who wanted to control Fillory. And now we see that no, first of all, it's more complex than that. And secondly, they have like a hand in the broader narrative of the quest of the seven keys. This season also has a life in a day. This season's episode 5 is called A Life in a Day, which is actually one of my favorite episodes. We see Elliot and Quentin go to Fillory. They accidentally go back in time, and they are solving this puzzle, this quest, and they live their entire fulfilling lives. I don't know, I really like this episode. I also like the episode where they go into the 23rd timeline. This season has the best episodes of The Magicians. Absolutely incredible. However, I cannot really talk about this season without talking about the last episode. In the last episode, they are all at the back door of magic. Elliot tries to kill the mistake made by the old gods using the god-killing bullet. Doesn't work. And for some fucking reason, Alice shows up, and she's with the gang, so she's there. And she destroys the 7 keys required to turn on magic. I do not understand this. If somebody can explain this to me, I would really appreciate it, but I don't get it. Now, I do understand that, okay, she liked magic, and when she became a Niffin, she loved magic, and when she became human again, she didn't really like being a human being because she loved magic so much. She loved the experience, which I can imagine from what she said sounds pretty good. Being the part of everything, all the magic in the universe, you can see everything. That sounds incredible. Of course, she doesn't want to lose that. So I get that. I get her hunger for magic. I also get her going to the library to try to finish the unified theory of magic. I also understand that. I don't understand when or how that switch flipped in Alice that, oh, she doesn't want magic anymore. What happened? The second thing I can't not talk about is Julia. I've already talked about the journey of Julia's. She was not accepted into I was gonna say Hogwarts. Julia was not accepted into Brakebills. Julia was cast out into the cold by Jane Chatwin, and that path resulted in her being essayed by this trickster god who she wanted to kill him so badly with the beast, with help of Katie and the demigod. And in the end, when he was right in front of her, when she was gonna pull the trigger, Persephone came and she talked her out of it. Which, greater good. Fine, fine. I understand that. Okay, but still though, that my heart still wants her to kill Reynard. And this greater good thing keeps coming up. Jane Chatwin, for instance. Oh, she cast her out into the cold so that she would get stronger. And yeah, she did by being fucking essayed by this trickster god. Yeah, sure, the beast is eventually killed. But at what cost? Oh, I guess it was for the greater good. No. Okay? Why am I bringing it up again? Because when Alice destroyed the keys, Julia Horcruxed those keys again, like Prometheus did. And guess what? She was a goddess. She became a full on goddess because of all the things that she did. She had the spark in her and she became a full on goddess. And now she's just a human again. Great or good? Fine. I still don't like it though. I mean, I understand from like a narrative perspective, the writers had to do something about Julia's god power or else she would be overpowered. I understand that. But still, though, if you look at her character as a real person, she had gone through so much. And then she ends up sacrificing everything. And for what exactly? So that the library gets complete control over magic and decides who does and doesn't deserve magic? Really? Anywho, rant's over now. Let's talk about season 4 and 5. Season 4 primarily deals with the looming threat of the monster who is in Elliot's body and our gang. Everyone else is trying their best to find a solution to get rid of that monster in Elliot's body. I actually like the twist where, oh, the monster isn't really building a body for himself, but rather his sister. I like that. I wasn't expecting it, but I do like it. However, the story that the binder tells about this sister, where there are these four librarians who somehow are able to break off or like cut up the sister monster into four pieces and become gods themselves. I don't get that. Like, how did they do it? Isn't the sister monster even worse and more powerful than the normal monster who was in Elliot's body? And if so, doesn't the sister monster have like power of multiple gods? How was she like how did the four librarians split up her power like that? I don't get that. I guess maybe they had special tools or power from the old gods themselves. That's one thing I can think of. But yeah. Another thing I wanted to really talk about is the library. It's not really that bad. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, in the story, they aren't really that bad. I mean, yeah, sure, they're taking control of the magical supply of the entire universe. I do agree with that. That's not okay. No one should have that much power. However, it's not like they're doing something evil with it. Okay, yeah, sure, there's this one person, the Everett guy, who is taking the magical supply and trying to become a god. But it's just one person. It's not like it's the library's goal to make someone a god and learn their secrets for the sake of knowledge or something like that, It's not a bad institution, rather, it's just one individual bad person. I feel like they could have made the library into a much worse institution. Like, they were definitely grinding up fairies so that they could do magic tricks. So, definitely, they're not all good. I feel like with the library's intention to preserve knowledge, I feel like it should have been expanded a bit more. Oh, library doesn't just want to preserve knowledge, but also gain knowledge. Knowledge of the gods, of the old gods, or something like that, So to achieve that goal, they reduced the ambient magical supply so that they could store it somewhere to achieve that goal. Maybe it involves, very horrible things, but they justify it because it's for the sake of knowledge. I don't know. I feel like they could have done a lot of things with the library, but they just didn't. It's okay, I guess. It's not necessarily bad. It's just something I wish they should have or could have done. I feel like that would have been more interesting. There is another thing I want to bring up. So when Quentin finds this reservoir of magic, we see just how big this reservoir is. It's pretty massive. It's pretty huge. However, one thing to note is that Everett was still putting more magic into this reservoir, and Everett's goal was to become a god. So my point is that even though this reservoir of magic looks pretty impressive, it's still not enough for Everett to become a god. Also remember that Everett has access to the library, poison room, so I don't believe that it's the lack of knowledge that's stopping him from becoming a god. Quentin takes 2 sips of magic from this reservoir, and then with that 2 sips of magic, they are able to contain a monster which has power of multiple gods in these bottles. How does that happen? Something is not adding up. I mean, you can say, yeah, sure, the bottles were from Fillory, so they are more magical than normal magic, I guess, but really, I don't think they would have been able to hold gods or a being with power of multiple gods. I do know that they talk about this that, oh, they can put more enchantments on the bottle to make it better. However, we're still talking about a being with the power of multiple gods. I just don't think that's possible. I'm sorry. Like, it made sense when that goddess appeared and she was like, okay, take blood from the stone and use it against the monster. That made sense because that stone came from Castle Blackspire, which was the earlier prison of the monster. So it made sense. Okay, it made sense in my head. But what about these bottles? They are not at all related to the monster. You know what I mean? It's really the season where we start to see problems like these. And I understand why. The Magicians is having a hard time expanding their universe. I get that. We don't want our heroes to be overpowered, and we want to make sure that the story is engaging, so the threats must continue to get bigger. I get that. However, you can only do them to a limit. You can't expand a fictional universe to infinity. Eventually, you'll see plot holes. Now, this is not to say that season 4 wasn't fun. It was very much fun. I very much enjoyed it. And these things that I'm talking about, I never really even noticed them the first time while I was watching the show. I started noticing them when I was rewatching the show for the third time. Another example of this that I can give is fairies. In season 5, we see that fairies are being hunted again in Fillory. However, in season 3, we see the fairy queen make a fairy deal that no fairy will be hunted ever again, and this deal cannot be broken. So, why are they being hunted again? I thought no one can break that fairy deal. So, how is that possible? I don't really have much to say about season 5. Season 5 deals with apocalypse, Fillories, and Earths. They destroy the moon, but they bring it back again, so everything's fine. Fillory is also being destroyed, but it's being destroyed by them because the Dark King had raised the dead, and yeah. So they put everyone in this pocket universe. And yeah, I like the twist that, oh, the Dark King is Rupert Chatwin. And they accidentally opened the door to the underworld and let the beast in, which no one really stopped them because Hades was mourning Persephone, and so he was not there, and he had retired apparently, and makes sense. Yeah. If we hadn't seen that, then I would have been like, well, what about Hades? Where is Hades? And yeah. But hey, we see it, so that's good. I don't know if you have noticed, but I like it when things make sense. I don't know, maybe I'm just running out of steam and I'm tired. But I don't have that much to say about season 5. Oh, wait, one thing. I want to mention this one thing, and fuck, I'm gonna go off on this. Penny and Julia. Now, I don't remember if this happens in season 4 or season 5. It's one of them. But essentially, Julia is stuck in this limbo of being a human and a goddess. She is unbreakable, like physically unbreakable, because she used to be a goddess. However, she doesn't have the magic of a goddess. So essentially, the binder, I believe, tells her that she has two choices. She can either become a human or she can become a goddess. And when the time comes to make a decision, Julia can't make a decision. So Penny makes a decision on her behalf. And he chooses human. Now, I got a few problems with this. First of all, we see that Penny and Julia are close to each other. I believe in my heart of hearts they must have had a conversation talking about this, and Julia must have voiced what she wanted. Now that's something you can say, well, maybe that didn't happen. Maybe they didn't have enough time. Which okay. I feel like that's a very important conversation, and I feel like normal human beings talk about these things, the things that's going on in their lives with, their partners or friends. I feel like he must have had some sort of an idea what she wanted.
So you can help me become a goddess again.
But hey, you can say, well, they didn't have enough time or they didn't talk about it. Fine, fine, okay. My second problem with this is that Penny is a fucking psychic. Why does that matter? He can just pop into Julia's mind and ask her point blank, hey, we gotta choose now, human or goddess, which one is it? He could have done that. He's a psychic. Come on! Like, what happened to his psychic powers? Wasn't he supposed to be psychic? Why can't he go in her brain now and just ask her what she wants? Really? Is that real? I don't know how. Maybe, he couldn't do that. Although he is a psychic, and when have we ever seen a psychic not be able to use their own powers? I mean, even when the magic is turned off, they can still use their own powers because they are like hybrids. I don't get it. And frankly, magic is turned on here, so there's no real reason why Penny couldn't ask Julia what she wanted. Problem number 3 that I have with this is, why didn't Penny choose goddess? Why am I saying it like it's the obvious choice? Because it is the obvious choice. Let's say that Julia wakes up and she's a goddess and she doesn't want to be a goddess. She has a lot more ways to figure out how to become human now that she's a goddess than the other way around. She could use the binder, and let's say the binder was not in picture, there are still other ways. She could have tried to find some information from other gods or goddesses, some other way to turn herself human again. And frankly, in this show, we see at least one goddess turn herself human again. So if it's possible for her, I'm pretty sure Julia can find a way. And hey, let's say like none of that works, okay? If she's a goddess, she can always Horcrux herself into keys and then she's back at square one. Yeah, sure, she's not a full on human, but still, though, we're back at where we started, Now they're back at square one, so they can continue their search as usual. But I feel like, having god powers would really help, but still, the point is, I feel like that's the obvious choice. That's the choice to make. So, why am I bringing all of this up? I brought all of this up to rule out any possibility that, oh, Penny didn't know what Julia wanted, so he just picked an option that seemed reasonable to him. No, he did not. It was purely selfish. And I don't understand why the story takes the perspective of Penny. And we're supposed to not be mad at him because even Julia forgives him. I don't get that. I really don't. Julia doesn't get to be mad at Penny. The way that the story is framed, we're supposed to take Penny's side. But it's not the right side. Fuck, just because he wanted a girlfriend, he would rob his girlfriend of the chance of becoming a goddess? Really? Nah, man, that was purely selfish. And Julia gets to be mad at him. Maybe break things off with him. Now, I do understand from the writer's perspective that they couldn't really make Julia a goddess. We have the same problem, Julia would be overpowered, it wouldn't make sense, there would be plot holes, blah blah blah. Makes sense. And this is a good way to get out of that situation, having Penny make the decision for Julia, from a writer's perspective. However, then if you're going to write in that, oh, Penny's going to make the decision for Julia and he's going to choose human, then accept the consequences that come along with it. I.e., Julia would feel upset and violated, and she would be angry at Penny, and she would be completely correct. She would have a right to be angry with Penny and maybe even break things off with them. Don't take Penny's side. Don't write Julia's anger as if it's something minor and it's just gonna go away in an episode. I simply don't understand why the narrative would frame Penny in such a way that, oh, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just in a bad spot and he had to pick one of the two. And so he picked this one. And yeah, it was a little selfish or whatever, but it's okay. No, it's not okay. Fuck you. Another thing I just wanted to bring up that I should have brought up when I was talking about season one or season two is Fen. She went through like a lot of trauma and a lot of bad things. Married off to a stranger, had a child, the child died in childbirth, her child was like bargained away to the fairies by a deal that she didn't make that was very coercive and manipulative. And then the person who made that deal is just mean to her. And that's okay. How? We always see Fen as this happy little girl, but she had went through like a lot of trauma. At one point, she literally believed that the log that she carried around was her child, and it was just played for jokes. It was just in the show. It wasn't really taken seriously, and I don't get why. She does her best to be accommodating to these earthling creatures. But yeah, I just don't think it's fair. I'm just looking at my notes right now and I've covered almost everything that I had written down at least. Okay, well, that's all. That's all for this video. Fuck. But even when I was going through the Cliff Notes version, it still took me like 2 hours to record this. God damn. How will I ever edit this video down? Well, that's tomorrow's problem. Anywho, if you like this video, subscribe and stuff. And if you have your opinions and or critiques of the show, leave them down below. I would love to read them. Okay, well, that's all I got for today. Take care. Bye.